Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the session. My name is Navjot Kalra. I'm the interim head of value-based healthcare at Swansea Bay University Health Board. I'm joined here by Stephen Frith, who's the program director of digital services for patients and public. So welcome to all of you, and I hope you thoroughly enjoy this session. We are going to be talking about the opportunity of using digital communication with citizens, which opens up exciting new avenues to interact more closely with them and to develop new models of care. Now, we know that there are readily available technologies that enable both immediate, bi-directional communication, such as phone calls, video conferencing, etc., and asynchronous, such as email, messaging, and forms. Now, these technologies also lead to new challenges, and the most prevalent of these is capturing and holding the data in a structured way so that it can be readily used as and when needed in subsequent patient interactions. The touch points for collections and the use are spread throughout the patient journey across the healthcare system, primary, secondary, and community. Patient-reported outcome measures, which is one of the ways we measure what matters to the patients, are one aspect of the improved use of technology to support new models of care. It provides a good worked example to illustrate how being organized at the outset in terms of data management and integration to existing system is essential. It also serves to illustrate how it's not just about data and technology, but at least as much to do with the change in the patient journey and the overall management of care. So today's presentation talks to both ends of these challenges. So the session will include an overview of the end-to-end process for collecting, combining, analyzing, presenting, and utilizing patient-reported outcome measures for the heart failure service at Swansea Bay, and how this is embedded in the clinical workflow to support direct patient care, triaging patients, and measuring the impact, which is the value to our patients. It'll also give you an illustration of how embedding PROMS into clinical workflow requires interoperability and seamless flow of information from the web-based interfaces, both home and in clinic, that the patients and citizens can interact with, which is what is the aspiration with the DSPP program. So what is the problem we're trying to solve here? So heart failure, and the disclaimer here is I am not a clinician. So the problem is that heart failure is the end stage of almost all cardiovascular disease, with 1 to 2% of the population and increasing. It's got non-specific symptoms, and it accounts for 2% of all NHS inpatient bed days. It's got a prognosis that is worse than many cancers. And based on the findings from the Atlas of Variation, and an internal audit suggested that 1 in 5 patients in Swansea Bay diagnosed with heart failure was on the wrong pathway. Right. So the question we're asking ourselves now is, what is a PROM? So a PROM is an evidence-based, internationally agreed, and usually licensed questionnaire that measures several domains of care that matter to the patient. Now, within the heart failure service, we've implemented both the EQ5D and the Kansas City cardiomyopathy PROM. In Swansea Bay, we're trying to use the term digital health assessment in the delivery and promotion of PROMs, as we want to steer away from questionnaires and surveys to make this a part of the patient's pathway, treatment, and care, moving towards self-management and co-production. Implementing PROMs are inherently complex because they touch so many aspects of healthcare system, from data storage to clinical engagement. And one way to tackle this complexity is to break the challenge down into smaller pieces. And the framework of collection, combination, analyses, presentation, and utilization, which throughout this presentation I'll call as CAPU, was developed in Wales. It's a useful way to do it, allowing people to focus on the areas where they can drive and support change. Again, PROMS implementation includes significant challenges. Example, altered clinical flow, limited web-based tools to support collecting data, real-time scoring and trending across time and clinical settings. Visualization tools for diverse stakeholders to be able to use these for decision making. This visual illustrates the many touch points throughout the patient journey, and each touch point needs consideration in the context of the CAPU and the utilization of data for decision making. Now, in each stage of CAPU, there are several technical solutions that may or may not have kept up the most recent developments in technology, architecture, interoperability, and data standards. And irrespective of the local implementation or specialty, all PROMS-related activity will require patient identification, an open data interoperability layer, and a way to ensure that patient-collected data finds its way into the clinical environment in an appropriate fashion. And this is the part of the core platform concept that the DSPP program will deliver. So when we talk about utilizing PROMS data, now I am going to be focusing on one aspect of utilizing PROMS data. Although PROMS data can be triangulated with clinical outcomes data, population health level data to identify unmet need, to identify unwarranted variation. But today we're going to focus on what matters to me. How am I doing? What is the likely outcome if I choose this treatment? And I'm going to show you some examples of how we utilize PROMS data within the heart failure service. So this slide describes the typical course of heart failure, and as suggested by the NCPOD failure to function report, there are some significant improvements required in the way we deliver this service in Swansea Bay. So within the improvements suggested, there is an improved diagnostic pathway, an improved primary care framework, and an improved access to community specialist nurses, but also with a focus to patient empowerment and self-management. So on the screen, you see the typical course of heart failure, and the process below with the green dots describes each step in that process where PROMs are collected. So those questionnaires that I showed you before, the EQ5D, the Kansas myopathy, these are the points where the PROMs are collected. So once the PROMs are collected, the information can be utilized for various different sorts of ways. So the visual that you see on the screen is for an individual patient and for each question to give an overview of change over time. And the symbol on the screen represents a change from previous assessment and the RAG rating change from baseline. So what you see on the screen here is when you collect PROMs, the green arrow shows when the anxiety or depression has got worse, and if the showering or having a bath is similar to baseline, and if it's a green, then it's better than the baseline or the PROM measured at a stage before this time. This is another example of how you can use PROMS data. This information is for an individual patient, which highlights area from a change from the previous reported outcomes. So whether or not they're walking 100 yards on the level ground from moderately unlimited to slightly limited, or their anxiety or depression from not anxious or depressed to slightly anxious. And as you can imagine, this information is really, really helpful to the clinicians who can then use this information to understand what's changed from the last time they saw the patient or what they need to focus on in the limited time they have to spend with the patient. This is another interesting view of PROMs. So I talked previously about service redesign. We talk a lot about service redesign, and we talk a lot about, well, we can redesign service in this way or that way, but do we ever understand what is the difference that we made to what matters to the patient? Now, this visual is based on real data collected within Swansea Bay for PROMs, and what it shows is that before the service was redesigned, we could see all areas in the Kansas 12 PROMs showing worsening, where the downward trend is improvement and the upward trend is worsening in this particular chart. So what you can see is before the heart failure redesigns happened, all the PROMS indicators were going in the wrong direction. But after the service redesign, what matters to me really improved. So this is a really powerful way of measuring whether a service has made a difference. Now, these are some of the benefits, and as you can probably understand, technology is a means to an end, and some of the benefits of implementing PROMs and providing the technology to implement PROMs, it reduced the time pressure on staff. They said there was a better use of their limited time. They also said that their ability to easily compare how the patient did from last time was really incredible. So this is the staff providing us benefit on the technology that was implemented to collect PROMs. But of course, as I described, this is a complex. The whole process of collecting PROMs in itself within CAPU is quite complex. So really, the challenges that we're talking about, how a patient interacts with the collection system, which patients are missed, consolidating data from multiple locations can be difficult. Standardizing data from reporting systems across clinics is difficult. Patient privacy protections. And some of these barriers are going to be service related and addressed as a part of the wider transformation projects, but the others, we hope, are going to be addressed by the DSPP program. So I'm going to be handing over to Steve now to describe how the DSPP program will address some of these barriers. Over to Steve.
Thanks, Navjot. So if we can move on to the next slide, it lists the things that I'm going to present. I should also say my broadband isn't the fastest, so if I disappear, I'll dial back in and pick up from where I left off. But I may end up talking to myself for a while before I realise. So the vision for the programme, it can be presented from a number of different angles. There's a kind of a what it's going to deliver and support, and there's how it's going to do that. And today I'm mostly going to talk about how it's actually going to be set up and deliver the kind of support for the kind of initiatives that Navjot has just outlined, such as PROMS to assist in the management of heart failure. But just before I get into the how it's going to do it, the what, the vision for the programme in terms of what it is very broad. We can see a kind of future where members of the public and patients have a multitude of mobile applications on their mobile devices for all manner of things, from banking to insurance and shopping, and also management of their health and well-being. And we don't see one single application satisfying all of the requirements for members of the public and patients for managing their health and well-being, but a kind of a collection of applications where a combination of the patient and the service provider picking from a kind of marketplace of functionality and selecting the application that they consider to be best of breed, offering the most appropriate solution and functionality for a particular requirement. So this kind of widespread modular concept of lots of modules of functionality is fundamental really to the vision that we've got for the programme and how it's been designed to operate going forwards. So I just wanted to kind of sort of lay that kind of position that actually the programme is really about coordinating a very large and far-ranging collection of modules of functionality, and trying to do that in a way that achieves two main objectives. One is to deliver a slightly better experience for the end user, for the citizen, the patient, so that it's not confusing and you're not actually having to have 100 applications and choose which application you use for a particular healthcare need. But also from a kind of an operational perspective and the perspective of the service, in terms of the data management challenge that patient-facing digital services create. So whether you call it integration, interoperability, management of data, all of these patient-facing digital services put a demand and a strain on the system, the ecosystem, the technology behind the scenes. And the programme is attempting to, or will, establish an improved, more coordinated approach for that management of the data behind the scenes, which will lead not only to kind of efficiencies and less time taken, but actually a safer kind of environment, if I can call it that, where there's much more possibility of having robust information governance and consistent consent models. So that's the kind of the vision for the programme in terms of what it's trying to achieve. It's trying to create a supporting environment and a platform for delivery of that vision. It's not trying to deliver the whole vision in one go. It's trying to support the delivery of the vision by multiple parties across the whole spectrum of well, initially NHS Wales, but also potentially in the social care arena as well. So that's my kind of vision. If I can move on to the next slide. I'm not quite sure if the slide has, don't tell me I've actually gone off. Where have we got to? Are you still able to hear me on the call actually? It seems to have frozen out at my end. I can see you, Navjot. Are you still able to hear me? Do I need to keep presenting? Okay, all right. I'll keep plowing on. I've lost track of which slide we're on, unfortunately. My video seems to have frozen. But assuming that we're on the vision for the programme slide still, it's the slide presents the kind of how we've set up the programme in terms of the governance structures and the division of who's going to be doing what. Now I can see it now. That makes things a lot easier. And this kind of triangle, I think, is the programme is intending to deliver. So there's a commissioning function that's carried out by the programme board, and that effectively holds the money, controls the money. There's a delivery engine, a kind of capability to build stuff and create a capability, and that's a combination of the programme team, but also blended resources from the market, both in terms of dedicated commercial partners that will be brought into the programme, but also special interest groups across the wider service, and also existing commercial solutions. So all of those are on the right hand side as kind of delivery components. But I think key to understand is the left-hand side, where we've got quite a wide-ranging set of assurance groups in the headings of practitioner, public and user, service delivery and transformation, technical and ethical. And those assurance groups basically provide an opportunity for the wider service to review the plans that come out of delivery and communicate back up to the programme board whether they consider them fit for purpose, because the programme is being set up to be kind of owned by the wider service in terms of direction of travel, priorities, and what it delivers and how it delivers it. And having that split along the bottom between a delivery capability, designing the delivery programme and the solution in response to the ask from the programme board, and then taking those plans to the assurance groups is a key way that the programme's been set up to provide that kind of governance and direction for the programme, and to enable the programme to feel like it's owned by the wider service and that people can actually get involved. And I've highlighted in red on this slide actually the areas where there's a definite opportunity to get involved in what the programme's doing and how it's doing it through the assurance groups, through special interest groups, and through the chairs of the assurance groups sitting on the programme board. And I think this setup, this establishment for the programme is key really to provide the governance that I think we're going to need in this really quite far-reaching the area that's covered by digital services for patients and the public, which is just an absolutely huge area. So that's kind of the vision in terms of how it's going to be governed going forwards. And I was going to move now into slightly what it's going to deliver at a high level, and to tie that back into the conversation we just had about PROMs. So if we move on to the next slide, and I'll see if my machine keeps up. Oh, there we go, that has worked for me, great. So the delivery, because it's such a broad area, and because the core programme is small and really all about building a core platform, the delivery is all about what we're calling federated delivery, or distributed balance of effort, really. So the core programme will focus very much on the bottom right of this slide in terms of setting up that thin slice at the bottom of the core platform. I'm going to unpack in a little while to explain exactly what's in there, and some of the early functionality that's integrated into a kind of core platform concept. But in terms of the vast range of digital services that are developed and being developed and will need to be developed in the future, these will vary in terms of the level of integration they have with the kind of the core platform. Some will be completely independent. At the top you've got links to other sites such as 111. Others will be partially integrated, and they'll make use of login, the single login, to give a slightly more seamless user experience. But actually, other than that, will be independent, might be accessed independently, and only loosely integrated into the environment. But nonetheless, we'll be able to benefit from data moving in and out, so that we can have consistent data and capture of data. And level 2, slightly more integrated with look and feel and control over exchange of data. And given that there could be dozens of different implementations of PROMs on different technologies across Wales in the future, some might be integrated at level 3, some at level 2, and perhaps even at some point the programme may decide that actually for a basic level of PROM functionality, we have some kind of core functionality at level 1. But all of that is to be decided going forwards. At the moment, it's more important to kind of define the concept that actually the core platform supports that integration at those different levels, and it'll be horses for courses in terms of what people want to do. And we're not, I mean, PROMS is just one example of how the programme supports its wider development, but there's a number of diabetic modules, for example, that at the moment are independent applications across Wales in use, and they would naturally slot in and be integrated at level 3 and may move down to level 2 at some future point. But each of those slices of the totality of the solution will be set up and governed by a special interest group to make sure that it's fit for purpose and doing what it's supposed to do. And the key thing from my perspective, not built and delivered by the core programme, because that would be a monumental task requiring a huge amount of effort. And I think if we learned anything in the NHS, it's these kind of big vision, big system projects do not work well. Breaking it down into these small chunks is seen as key really for the success in this space. So really it's a way of saying that the core programme really is focusing on the bottom right, that core platform, and building some of the level 1 functionality in a gateway application. And I was going to move on the next slide and just unpack slightly what we mean by core platform services, because that might help to explain the different levels of integration. So in no particular order, top left, data interoperability. This is a very important concept, I think, for a lot of the activity that's going on at the moment. And you may have spotted on the first slide that within the programme team there's a work stream called alignment, and that's about recognising the amount of work that's going on in this space and proactively engaging with projects out there to align what they're doing with this core platform concept. And already we know and we can see that the main ask of these projects is loosely collected under the heading of integration, but really it means being able to get data out of legacy systems into other patient-facing digital services, and equally importantly, to capture the data in those patient-facing digital services and pass it back down the stack and store it, and not just store it within an NHS environment, but actually store it in such a way that it can be resurfaced in a clinical environment. And so, for example, when we're talking about PROMS, that PROMS data, whatever the technical solution is across Wales, needs to be collected, stored and available in, say, a clinical workstation environment, and presented in a way that a special interest group has designed to make sure that it's presented in a meaningful and timely fashion. So the role of the core platform in that is to just make that data go up and down that stack as quickly and efficiently and safely as possible, and have standards, impose standards, and to create an environment where standards can be defined by those best placed to define them, and to encourage the maximum availability and use of that data, but in a safe environment. So that data interoperability function of the core platform describes all of those things, which starts to sound very much like a patient angle on the National Data Resource, which has spent a lot of time in recent years describing the kind of the changes planned for clinical data flows. And the patient data flows sit naturally alongside that, using the same technology to move and control that data. And key is that it supports the integration of local developments, so that where we've traditionally had bespoke integration services that are difficult and challenging to maintain, let alone expand, it's putting a kind of standardised approach on that, and so that third-party applications can plug in a meaningful way into NHS data. But it's also a useful place to put the information governance, and within that I mean all the consent model and the rules about access to data and what data can and can't be used for, and management tools to ensure that we're continually compliant with that. Moving around to the bottom left, identity management. All of these patient-facing digital services have a requirement to identify the patient to a lesser or greater degree, and to lock that patient identity to an NHS identity, so that we can share NHS data in a way that we know is safe and to the correct person. And doing that in the same way that they have done in England, with a verification process and NHS login, seems like a logical step to offer that as part of the core platform in Wales, so that those applications that need that kind of identity management and authentication have a place to do that. Bottom right, resource centre. If we're going to talk the talk about encouraging federated development and supporting alignment of federated development with a core platform, then clearly there needs to be a resource centre with documentation, a sandbox environment for commercial operators to test against and develop against. Access to resources, and there's I think two types of resources here, or three. There's the documentation, there's the sorry, I just saw a question come in about the expected audience for this session. I'll pick that up at the end. There's three types of resources. There's the documentation, technical, there's the people with the skills that could help on special interest projects, and also there's money, and using money to a challenge fund to support the development of functionality based on priorities set by the programme board. And then finally, the fourth point is gateway application, and I think we're increasingly at pains to point out that this is a kind of optional aspect of the core platform. For some people in some projects, the concept of an NHS Wales application is not needed, and for other people it's an absolutely essential part of the core platform services, and it's in there to provide not only an entry point for members of the public, for those people that choose it, but also to home the identification management, etc., and all of that functionality. So the core platform will effectively support the development of patient-facing digital services, or the procurement of patient-facing digital services from the market, to support particular deliveries and transformation of service delivery, such as the introduction of PROMS, such as engaging with patients through digital services for specialties such as diabetes, for enabling the capture of patient information on wearables and surfacing that in a clinical environment, and creating support for anyone working in the service that is either under pressure or desires to, or is trying to improve patient communications through digital services. And the core program, the core platform, will be a resource centre to support all of those initiatives in as efficient as possible and coordinated fashion. So I can't really answer the question about the expected audience for this session. Apologies. But I'm assuming it's people out in the service trying to deploy digital services and wishing to understand what the newly established program, Digital Services for Patients and Public Program, is intending to do and how it's intending to do it. Anyway, I'm 3/4 of the way through, so I'll plough to the end and then pick up the questions and move to Q&A. So the final slide, if we move on to that one, is just a rough outline of the timescales. We're in 2 distinct stages: procurement of specialist resource to help set up the core platform, because I'd much rather be presenting something that actually works rather than PowerPoint presentations of how it's going to work, and we need people in to set that up. As soon as we've got the contracts in place to do that, we're going to run a development in a series of work packages. The first one is a discovery phase, just so that we can confirm exactly the time required and the approach. The second one's the key one, really, in terms of building something that's actually tangible and demonstrates that this can work and that we can link into federated patient digital services. We can move data in and out of the NHS data environment in a safe way, and we can coordinate activity across the whole of Wales in this space, and the core platform concept works. But that won't deliver something that will support an application release, and that will be the minimum viable product when we start building extra functionality into the product. But as we go forwards on this timeline beyond next year, it's a little bit a basket of possibility, and the programme will define the priorities and work out which areas of functionality are most important. And again, we've got built in the concept that prioritisation of what the programme delivers and develops will be based on a value-based approach. So the programme board will look at where best value can be achieved in terms of moving to and supporting the use of digital services and deploying things like PROMS, like video consultation, like different models of care, and based on the value assessment of that, the work packages that get thrown into the development through or supported through the core platform will be set, the progress will be set. But again, just to reiterate, if in a year's time we've got the core platform set up and we've got the core services, and the programme board decides to prioritise the development of a particular functional module to support a particular area of care, that doesn't mean it's going to get built centrally and rolled out across Wales. It means that expressions of interest will be invited, a selection process will be run, special interest group will be set up that is owned and run and managed through that assurance process, so that it is driven by people in the service working out all ends of the change that's required, because the technology is just a part of any of these kind of digital service initiatives. The change on the ground in the models of care and the interaction with citizens and patients is probably more effort than the technology in many ways, and that's why the whole concept of a module needs to be owned by a special interest group that can pick up and drive in a particular area, but know that when they do that, they will be doing it on a core platform, and that they won't have to fix every single bit of the problem from their end of the problem, and they'll be able to plug into solutions for safely moving data around, surfacing data, patient ID management and consent models, etc. So that's how the digital services for patients and the program for public and patients program has been set up, the vision for it. We're on that green bar on this timeline, so we're at very early stage of having assurance of the proposals and the documentation for procurement. And you know, the door is open really for people to attend those assurance groups, and to drop us an email if you've got any questions or concerns, because we're very keen to reach out through events like this and explain the vision and have it owned and driven across the wider service. So I'll stop talking now and I'll start reading the questions that came in whilst I was chatting. I think the next slide may have an email address on it. or it may not. This may be the last slide, in which it was my first slide, wasn't it? It's in the pack. So there's an email address on the quintuplet slide, the fifth before last slide. Oh, there we go. There I am. So I think I hand back to Navjot at this point to do the coordination of the Q&A, and I'll start reading some of the questions and working out some of the answers. I hope that was informative, and I hope it kind of hit the mark, and it was kind of what people were expecting in terms of how the core platform will support federated delivery of things like PROMs. But feel free to let us know. So over to you, Navjot. Thanks very much.
Hey, sorry, I was on mute. Okay, so I'm here now, and we've got lots of questions, so we'll aim and aspire to answer a few. So Steve, the first question is for you, and it talks about, will the core platform operate similarly to the English NHS app?
Yeah, that's a $1 million question. Yes and no, and in fact I've had that question in a number of different ways. Related to that is, why don't we just lift and shift the NHS app in England? And in some ways that is kind of an option still on the table, and you know, it may well be that proves to be the most appealing way of delivering against our vision. But there are a couple of key differences. Clearly, the two, from a political perspective, it has to be branded NHS Wales, not NHS England. So the NHS app is just NHS England at the moment, and secondly, would need to be bilingual. And then the second way of answering it is that also the application is actually the small part of this. You know, creating an application, whilst not trivial, is a well-trodden path. Integrating it into the plethora of NHS systems behind the scenes is by far the more challenging aspect of this, and where most of the resource will be directed. And that doesn't really matter if it's supporting a version of the NHS app code that's been rebranded and lifted and brought across, or whether it's a new application that's been written for Wales. But given that the gateway application is actually really only a very small part of the vision and the effort at this stage, it's for the market to say which is going to be the most cost-effective way of getting to that vision. But in terms of, is it the same? Yes, in the initial phases, but I think, you know, I mean, I don't want to dismiss the NHS app in England. It is at the moment a window on primary care systems, so it allows you to view your medical record and data from the primary care perspective, and also book appointments subject to the GPs having facilitated that functionality. But it doesn't allow you to reach into secondary care, and that's where there's a divergence, I think, with England and Wales, possibly, in that both in England there's definitely an aspiration to do that, and they're working on plans to do it. But if you think about the kind of integration stack in England, the NHS ecosystem and the login, NHS login, allows much more integration at level 2 and level 3, and doesn't really allow for integration at level 1 in quite the same way that we might be able to achieve in Wales. So in terms of early stage, creating a view of a primary care record and functionality that allows bookings in primary care, then yes, this vision would look very much like the NHS app in England. In terms of how quickly it can start to plug in extra modules at different levels of integration, it may look quite a lot like the ecosystem in England, but under the scenes it's slightly different, because it does allow for integration at a slightly more ground up level. So I'm not sure how well that's answered the question, but I guess two parts. Yes, it'll look very much like the NHS app in England, rebadged or rebranded for NHS Wales with similar functionality. But two, under the bonnet, it might be very different in terms of how it enables rapid development and integration more completely of modules developed across the service.
Thanks, Steve. So I got another question, observation probably. So Navjot touched on the issue of the response burden. The data capture burden is often a key issue with PROMs and PREMs. supermarkets being an example of a light touch approach for their service users. Can you say a little more on this challenge and work to streamline data capture and meaningful use, Steve?
So this is a good question, because it starts to delve into the kind of the boundaries between the core platform services and special interest groups. So the actual bit that touches the patient is definitely in the domain of a special interest group, and whilst there might be tools and forms to assist, it will be for the special interest group to know the patient cohort and to know what's actually likely to work, and to pick up and spread best practice. However, you know, it's one of the advantages of this vision is if something works well in one corner of Wales, then it's going to be pretty quick and easy to pick it up and shift it into another corner of Wales if that's what people want to do. So if there are examples of patient forms and push notifications to mobile devices and online collection through mobile devices that work, then this will offer a way of sharing that. But in terms of actually what patient capture arrangements might look like in a PROMS environment, that depends hugely on the special interest group and what commercial partner they're using and how they've decided to build their patient capture. Once it hits the core platform, it will have to start to comply with standards or define the standards for putting that data into data repositories and for resurfacing it in a clinical environment. And that's where we'll start to see more alignment in terms of approach, so that we're all contributing to a greater knowledge base in a structured fashion. But in terms of the actual patient-facing touch points and capture devices, that would be for the special interest groups to define. Although, you know, exciting opportunities in there, and I'm sure we'll all delve in and get involved.
Thanks, Steve. And on that note, there is another question. There's two questions I'll probably pose in one single question, Steve, if that's all right. So first question is, you know, what will the role or participation levels of users or citizens be within the program, which I think is a really crucial question, considering that we're talking about the population that we serve. And the second question, Steve, is do you have any idea on who will form part of specialist advisory groups yet?
Yeah, so two good questions. The role of patients and the public is twofold, and in fact everybody's role is sort of twofold in this, and in the delivery model. There's a role in kind of assurance, and there's a role at the end of communications. And what I mean by that is clearly the role of patients and the public is in testing, fitness for purpose, and even before that, assuring the design and the approach of any of the deliverables. And that'll be the same whether it's a special interest project in a federated delivery or whether it's part of the core platform and part of the gateway application. The whole delivery model with the commercial partners is based on agile working, where the technology end of this will be delivered in very rapid sprints of 2-week cycles and putting something in front of patients and in their hands and testing. So we've got a whole patient involvement testing regime that is being set up and steered by the patient and public assurance group in the list of 5 assurance groups. But that's the assurance, and then the communication for this is also vast, but different, because the communication is about what's actually gone through assurance and is ready for live release, if I can call it that. And I think it's important that we try and keep that as separate as we can, especially in the early stages, so that we're not actually mixing up communication and people wanting to just know what's going on with people that are actually able and capable to do the assurance and the testing. But that's the kind of patient and user input through that group and through extended groups, through special interest development projects. But also there's the role of the service and people working in the service, because whilst they're not directly users of the digital application per se, they are nonetheless absolutely fundamental in the transformation angle of this and the kind of changes in way of working, and will have in many ways as much, if not more, to say about the way these services are set up and described. So I mean, fortunately, we're not ploughing a new field here in terms of how agile working and agile development is taken forwards, and developing these kind of new digital services. There is a lot of experience out there in terms of the testing regimes and the cyclic approach to alpha and beta testing. But I think we will need to be mindful of the slightly different perspective of actual end users and people in the service that are actually deploying the digital service, and we need to make sure that both of them are equally represented in the design, testing, and release kind of cycle.
Thank you.
The second part of that question was about the assurance groups and membership of the assurance groups. We've got an expression of interest form, and it's publicly available. If you need a copy, just email us, and you can either nominate people or put your name down. At the moment, we've got the doors open for membership on all the assurance groups, and roughly speaking, the approach we're adopting is anyone can come in and the group will accept them and meet, and there's terms of reference, and if the group starts to feel that it is getting unwieldy or has disproportionate representation, then in the first instance it will be for the group to rectify that and to effectively tell people if they've wandered into the wrong party politely, or if there are people missing. And if it gets out of hand and it really oversubscribed or undersubscribed, then the programme board may start to have a view as to how we get full representation. But at the moment, there's no barrier, and anyone that has time and skills to offer would be welcome to join those groups. Just ask for the expression of interest form.
Thanks, Steve. And on that note, I've got a question here that says, can industry be involved in any of the specialist groups set up to support and advise? And thank you for the detailed presentation, it says. And I'll take the other one within this one as well, because again, a question from the industry, a colleague looks like, will the resource piece include open source libraries examples to help third parties like us and implement integrations? So I hope you got the questions, otherwise I can repeat them. Yeah,
I got those questions, and they're absolutely, the program's made to answer those questions, because it's an emphatic yes to both of them actually. So yes, the resource is absolutely all about allowing, I mean, in the ideal world, a commercial company would download a whole load of stuff, plug into the sandbox, develop an application, and we might not even know about it until they come knocking on the door of the programme board or the Welsh Government and say, look what we've got. If you like this, you can just flick a switch and make it live. That would be a brilliant outcome. And is actually covered in the diagram about the vision for the programme. There's a box that says procure existing solution or new build procurement, and that's all about working with industry. But I see even a special interest project setting up a particular area to be integrated into this ecosystem would naturally, nonetheless, in the current environment, probably align with a commercial partner. I mean, there are some instances where something might be developed in-house or something might exist and need to be tailored and moved into this environment. But in a greenfield or relatively new development for a functional module, an ideal outcome is a special interest group working with a commercial partner, so that we provide our NHS and service experience and access to patients to the commercial market to build out from that. So it's all about that. And then there's a kind of third part to the answer, which is that we are currently procuring commercial partners to actually help be on the inside of this and effectively be kind of poacher turned gamekeeper to help set up this core platform. So we're very keen that that suppliers that may be able to either be an application partner and develop the application aspects of this, or be a technical development partner and help develop the data control and data movement aspects of this to get in touch and start registering with the procurement portal that we're going to be using when we go to market, hopefully this side of Christmas. So yeah, absolutely, the programme is completely predicated on working closely with colleagues in the commercial sector.
Brilliancy. And another one, to that note, when will a core platform be live across Wales so every Welsh citizen can have access to their data? $1 million question.
It is $1 million question. So for this time next year, is the target. I mean, I'm reluctant to hang my colours on the mast with that one, because it is slipping to the right, because we're building more time into the programme at this stage for events like this, and to do the assurance and make sure people are comfortable with the direction of travel, and there has been proper opportunity for assurance of the plans. And it is hugely dependent on the capability, skills and ability to deliver from the commercial partners. And you'll have noticed on the last slide on timescales, the work packages are a discovery stage, where we're effectively anticipating the commercial partners to come in and lift the lid and hopefully not go, oh my gosh, what a mess, but to kind of see the environment in which they're going to have to work and operate and plug into from a data and technical perspective, and re-baseline delivery plans. But at the end of that discovery phase, we will then move straight to a proof of concept, and that's really exciting, because the proof of concept demonstrates that all the bits and components of the vision do actually click together and work, but won't be that point where members of the public will want to start accessing the functionality, because it'll have gaps, and those gaps get filled by the work package that's called minimum viable product. And that's where we start moving into, we've held up a straw man as to what we think that might look like, but I suspect the assurance groups will start to increasingly have a view as to what's considered a minimum viable product, and at which point we can open the doors. I should also say the expectation is that we wouldn't expect necessarily to have a kind of a big bang launch event, but that this would be released through smaller groups and in different pockets across Wales, and functionality will be switched on sort of over time. But the target at the moment on the plan is to complete that third minimum viable product stage by about this time next year, subject to all those caveats.
Thank you, Steve. Another question. So thank you for your presentation. It says, in relation to level 2, does this mean that patients will be in control of their data and decide if they would like to share their data with others? So
the consent and the control of the data is built in at core platform, actually. So it's right down at kind of level 0, level 1, and part of the integration at the different levels would require kind of baking in alignment with that consent model, because I don't think anyone's suggesting that there'd be a different consent model in use across Wales and for different kind of functions. Same consent model, but different levels depending on the data. And then it really depends very much on what the actual functional module is doing. I mean, if the functional module is just collecting some fairly generic patient-entered data and not necessarily resurfacing it in the NHS clinical environment, you might have a different consent model but the moment that data starts to come into the NHS ecosystem of data and starts to be used to inform clinical decisions, then it will have to comply with the consent model. And the consent model will absolutely put the patient in control of those decisions, and part of the challenge is to do that in a kind of meaningful way, so the patient is informed in terms of the various consents, and to avoid the confusion that we get with consent in the health environment, where we're talking about consent for use and control and visibility of where data goes. We're not talking about consent for clinical procedures, which is a confusion that we're going to have to try and work our way around in this.
Thank you so much, Steve. So I think, I would like to thank everybody who participated. We had a great time, and I hope you did too. And we've got lots more sessions coming this afternoon, and lots more tomorrow. So the information is on your screen. We've aspired to answer almost a lot of questions, but if we haven't, we'll contact you directly through the details provided. And thank you so much again. And yes, have a great time and a great afternoon.
Thanks, everyone.